Hello folks, thank you once again for coming to Mesoamerica, your place for magical, occult, and Mesoamerican just culture. Today we're going to speak about the fourth page of the Dresden Codex. This is a page that also tells us a lot about the tradition of omens and ceremonial magic or even just ceremonial almanac gathering of data for the Maya. I believe that this almanac is not just a almanac. There's a lot of magic, there's a lot of symbolism behind it, and we need to be able to get ourselves into the shoes of the Maya for us to be able to understand what is it that how they lived their lives and how they understood it. And I just think that they wrote almanacs like we do, where you just basically have weather stations and are able to write down whatever it is that we are going to predict for the coming months. And so thank you for coming, and let's go. Now in this first segment, the upper part, that is a very telling way of how probably this almanac was put together. The figure all the way on the left, that is one of the first lords. He's wearing a shell necklace and a quetzal bird from the nape of his neck that stretches all the way to his back. This tells us a lot. Number one, that he probably came from the regions of Belize or Guatemala. Shells indicate kind of like the ocean, and the quetzals, birds, usually they live in Guatemala. There are not a lot of them in Mexico. They like the dense foliage for them to survive. And there's a red background. The red background usually indicates the east. So it probably says that it was traveling from east to west, and or he's from the east. And so he obviously has come to Chichen Itza to partake of this ceremony. He, of course, we learn a little bit later how he personifies or is representing something. And so therefore it seems that these neighboring or somehow ally nations gathered together for this ceremony to try to speak for the gods. These are trying to become priests, and then the gods come later on. The guy on the just right next to him, he's an old man. He has a green background. The color green sometimes means west, so he probably likely either came from Mayapan or from Uxmal or from Izamal. And then the phrase above says he was thunderous in the word of Chak, lord of innumerable successions. My guess is he probably came from Uxmal, because the pyramid of Uxmal has a big Chak on the top. Well, a lot of them have a Chak on the top, but I think whatever city he came from, the patron god was Chak. Now the last guy on the right, he is an old man. He is looking like God N. Don't ask me what God N is called, because that's what archaeologists call him. They just call him God N. The little phrase on the top is kind of incomplete, but it says he was thunderous in the word of Kan Itzam Tu'um. Now there are two things that we need to explain here. It says he was thunderous. The word thunderous probably means like reverberations, like the god himself is the thunder or lightning, and so therefore the god he was thunderous, meaning that he was able to interpret the force or the strength of that particular god, either Chak or Itzam Tu'um. Now we have elaborations of god names like Itzam or Itzamna, now with additions of, in this case, for example, Tu'um. These are probably assignments based on time. The god is not just a stationary god like for us, like where you have Enki or whatever god. Now on the second segment we call it segment B, we have three gods coming in. These particular gods are quite powerful gods, and we have to elaborate as to what is it that the Maya are trying to say here. And it's not very hard to try to elaborate or to make an educated guess, because we kind of have a lot of clues as to what does it mean when they say speaks, particularly because of the nature of the god. For example, if a god is attributed with fire and he speaks, it means he's going to speak with the words of fire. But these ones it's not the god of fire. We will read a little bit. It says, we see the thunderings of the god in Samna Kokoach, the god in Samna. Here now we see him kind of like a snake coming in. It's not just a snake, it's a snake with like a face inside. The symbolism there, it's quite huge. I'm not going to start trying to deduce the symbolism here because there's a lot to unravel here. And then the next one, we have the god of wind, Ik. He also says it speaks. Now, combining these two is basically the creation of winds are speaking, which means that there's like a creative force coming into this particular page, which is just beautiful. It's just kind of like the forces. And also, let me explain, the god in Samna is one of the creator gods, and as a creator god, he brings the force or the speaking of creation with him. And of course, the wind is like that. He takes that creation and spreads it everywhere, like pollen, as it just starts to plant all over the land. Now, the first on the top, it reads, the god Kimil is dying, announcing destruction, which is the punishment for the fire. Now, what does this mean? Sometimes the fire symbolizes a sacrifice. If a sacrifice was not done for a particular god, people felt that there was going to be punishment. Now we can take that in two perspectives. If you have seen my videos, you know that I am an OBS type of person, and I love talking about the gods of Mesoamerica, but I also love to talk about the truth about just human nature. And so we do that today. You know, Christianity has been one of the most ill-manipulated religions ever. And of course, the Maya, you know, we're humans as well. And so therefore, when a sacrifice needed to be performed, it meant that a priest needed to be involved. And if the priest was not involved, of course, he did not profit. It's kind of like Catholic priest. You have to pay the priest for like weddings or anniversaries or whatever the heck. And so if you don't go to the priest and pay him money, then therefore they're out of some money. And so in this one, it says that a bad omen is going to happen because a fire was not performed. So it might have been a certain type of manipulation on behalf of the priest. Once again, in this page, kind of like in page number 1, the number 52 comes into play and is broken down into different segments. Now, this number 52 likely had to do a lot with the development of plantations or the development of certain rituals, but this one turns a little bit beautiful and just kind of like very symbolical, because the numbers red and the numbers in red and the numbers in black seem to be fluctuating between the Garim Sam not coming in, or the snake. And so, as you guys know, the red and the black symbolize east and west. And so, therefore, the symbolism means that this Garim Samna kind of transverses through the skies from the world of the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun, east and west. And as a result, also, it determines certain segments of maybe clouds where things became a little bit dark, or clear skies fitting the plants. And so therefore the Garim Samna seems to control this, and they're able to keep track of how many hours they had clear skies and how many hours they had cloudy or kind of darker skies. You know, you can say the red, for example, the east ones are clear skies, and then the black ones, the west ones, are cloudy skies. And of course, the god Imzamna travels throughout. Segment C becomes very interesting here because the god starts to perform intellectual activities. And as a result, these intellectual activities seem to have a certain type of autonomous creative properties to them, where just by merely thinking about things, things become creative, kind of like in Gnostic Christianity. At the bottom of the glyph, of the page, we see the tumuglyph, which is all the gods are seen to be holding a tumuglyph, which is the glyph for a verve, which basically means that these gods have the power of creation within their hands. Now, this power of creation is not necessarily a good thing. We read on top that the god Kinahau, Hau means Lord, that his verve is a bad omen. And the god Imsamna of the seeds, or pepitas, the real translation is called pepitas, but I think the translation is pepitas, kind of like a seed, kind of like a pumpkin seed. So to me, that's a seed. So it's not necessarily translated as pepitas, but translated as seed. And so Imsamna of the seeds brings his omen. The third omen says the god Ik commanded his word, and the omen is of kin. And so basically means that the power of these omens are under the jurisdiction of the god Imsamna and the god Kim. Now, the context for this prediction reminds me a lot of the biblical story of Joseph, where Joseph and the king seem to be having a series of dreams about bad omens that are about to happen. And Joseph is told how to ration food in order to prepare for this bad season that is coming up. So these are people that are also having dreams or visions or predictions of bad omens, and so therefore they have to prepare themselves for what's to come. On the next page, we will see how the people in there are responding to these bad omens. Meanwhile, let's elaborate a little bit on what does this page mean. The predictions are not made by one person. They're made by multiple priests and multiple people. Now, this is great, and because it maintains everyone, or at least the surrounding regions, the allied nations, united in their predictions. If something bad were to happen, they cannot just blame one nation and say, oh, you guys made this prediction, and so therefore now we're having a bad time, and you guys do not have a connection with the gods, so we're going to go to war against you because we're hungry and it's your guys' fault. The way in which they're conducting this type of ceremonies, it is very smart politically, because it's not just one nation's fault, it's everyone's fault. And they involve themselves with their own patron gods, meaning they're very allowable to interact with their own gods and to bring it into the table. And it just creates a great sense of community and just alliances. The second one, the predictions by the priests are manifestations of forces of nature. They're not just talking for an imaginary god. You know, they're talking for elemental forces that they understand, for forces that they can predict, and as a result, they speak with the backing of their knowledge and their understanding of nature. Now, also on the bottom one, the fact that the gods speak with the power of the verve, that is very Mesoamerican. See, this is Mesoamerican, of course. For example, the Aztec king was not called king. He was called the great speaker, the Tlatoani. And so that was his title. His title was not king. His title was not a how. He was not lord. He was the great speaker. And basically means that he speaks for the gods and he speaks for the nation. And so therefore they have the authority. The verve, the speaking, is the authority. And so all three of them have the authority and the power. And so therefore they're united in their intent and their purpose. And also they are not quite able to predict the future on how many days it will take for these things to happen, but they're very good at tracking them, and they know that it's about to that it's going to happen. I myself am of the belief that these people were able to predict weather pretty well. Not only because they had huge population densities in which they were able to feed their people, they understood nature, they understood the stars, they understood the passage of time. And as a result, they were able to be very successful. This almanac was probably kind of like their Bible. They were able to feed their people, and they were very good at it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the understanding of religion. Now, these gods don't have to be looked up as gods by us, or maybe they didn't even look at them as gods as well. A lot of royal people, they understood that gods were somehow just fables, but they represented a concept. They represented an archetype. An archetype that, of course, things have to be created. Of course, yes, the wind flows. Of course, yes, water has to come. And so we can either understand them as either gods, or we can understand them as archetypes or as natural forces of nature. But understanding their workings and their periods is something that we need to understand for us to be able to feed our people. And so that is why understanding this codex is so intrinsically valuable, because we can understand how those people were able to understand nature and their reality, and that not only their own reality, but also the reality of the nation, and as we saw in this page, the reality of the neighboring nations and how they're going to feed them, and how the passage of time and how the workings and their predictions came into play for their own lives and for the life of their nations and their alliances. But anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.